Thank you guys for joining us today for the speed learning session with Give Effect and our Habitat affiliate. I think it's going to be a great speed learning session. I'm going to talk about kind of the upcoming conferences. So excited that we're going to be attending conferences and at the Midwest Region Conference in Minnesota, the Florida State Conference in Daytona, the Western Region Conference in Portland, and then Camp Colorado in Colorado as well. So if you don't get to connect with us, before then, that would be great to see you at the shows. Stop by and say hi to us. I'll be attending a majority of them, so I'll be traveling from Georgia out to see everyone. So my name is Leah, and I'm a nonprofit solution consultant here at Give Effect. We are here for a short 30 minutes speed learning session, a great format for you guys to hear quickly on your lunch break or your morning break about what other habitats are and how they're being leaders in your field. I know that. So the speed learning session, the agenda, 10 to 15 minutes of interview, and then 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A where you post in the chat or in the feature, and we'll be monitoring that throughout the sessions. And Stacy has been in her position for 4 years with Habitat for Humanity, Kansas City. Hey! Okay. Oh.
Okay, there's my video.
Yay! You want to hop into just saying a little bit of your historic, right? The history of the 120 builds and the 400 volunteers. Just paint a little picture on the history.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Tara and Give Effect, and thank you all for your patience. Technology sometimes is not our friends, and then other times it is. So there you go. So I've been with Habitat KC. I'm the community engagement manager. I've been here for 4 years. I'm responsible for managing all of our volunteer programming here. I work on the development team. I'm responsible for some fundraising and just building engagement with our community partners. So as Leah said, we have had a lot of success with sponsored team builds, mostly on our construction sites, some in our restores. And that has taken a long time to get to where we are. We're really proud of our work. I would say that when I started 4 years ago, we did not have consistent team builds or sponsored corporate groups coming out. We certainly had corporate sponsorships, but we didn't have a good process in place for how that worked and how we facilitated it. So in the last year, we've grown to be around 120 sponsored team build days. Our goal is for this year for that to increase. And it's really taken a lot of rebuilding our volunteer programming, both on our construction sites, in our restores, how we communicate with our main contacts at our corporate partners, but also with those volunteers, how to keep them engaged, how to give them the information that they want, and frankly, make it easy for them to register, to volunteer with us, how to receive communication, that type of thing.
It's kind of that whole picture, right? From start to finish. And that's kind of what I was sharing while you were getting access to join, is that not just thinking the holistic, they volunteer and they're done, right? Keeping that engagement. So we'll kind of talk through, we'll start like at the baby phase, right? Like, how did you know, wow, this is working? And how did you start, right? And kind of starting out and planning, and then we'll move kind of into the engagement and retention phase. And then now I've got the bigger groups of volunteers. What do I do and how do I keep that going? So kind of do it like in a timeline, ebb and flow.
Yeah,
we'll start
absolutely. Yeah. So really from the very beginning, what it took was just as a team, working with our construction team and our restore team, of really deciding what our volunteer experience looked like, what we needed to do to improve it, and what we needed to do to make sure that from the very first point of contact of them just getting assigned a date and getting them registered, what that looked like, all the way to the very end when they were done, and how we follow up with them. So we've kind of created a process, if you will, for volunteer experience, but also a process for what it looks like if you're a sponsored team build day. What do you get from us if you are giving us a sponsorship to come out and volunteer? So one of the things that we have found through a lot of surveying our volunteers and our partners is that communication is key. And so what we have done is created a very clear process when we schedule a build day. We are fortunate enough to be able to operate 3 construction sites a day, and we have 5 restores. So we have a lot of capacity as far as putting those groups on site. We've developed like, what does a group look like? How big can it be? We have a very defined number for construction and for restore. We don't go over that. So we're very clear in that. We have a very strict registration process. They have to be registered. All the volunteers do 2 weeks in advance. And that allows our construction team and our restore team time to plan what that scope of work looks like on the construction site.
Yeah.
The registration process is very smooth, and I can thank Give Effect for that. That system really has allowed us to improve our volunteer experience, and then just that overall communication part with our points of contact in our organizations to the individual volunteers. They all complete their waiver online. It's all digital, so there's no paper. Eliminating that paper was key for us. We used to have an entire staff person that was responsible for all of the volunteer coordination when it came to paperwork, making sure all that was taken care of, going out to site, gathering it if they didn't get it in advance, all of that. We don't have any of that anymore. We have that requirement that they have to fill it out online and that they have to have it done 2 weeks in advance. That has been key.
Yeah, so you took that time to kind of train and educate your volunteers.
Absolutely.
How did you feel like you didn't overwhelm them, like to start out, right? Did you start out with a clear picture?
Yeah, so we have kind of an email template that we send each of our points of contact through our corporate groups. And it has very specific instructions on how to register their volunteers. And we utilize the shift and then the reservation part of Give Effect. So we have a link, and they go into that link and they can put their volunteers' names and email addresses, send them an email, and they fill out that registration. So it's very seamless, and it's very clear. And I think that is what's really important. We only require our volunteers to complete a waiver once a year. So Give Effect can track that for us, and it doesn't require them to continuously sign a waiver if they come out multiple times. So it's just a very seamless and easy process. And we get a lot of really positive surveys about that, about how easy it is for people to sign up to volunteer. So once all that pre-registration stuff is done and it's time for the volunteer day, we have automatic emails set up to where they get an email 5 days, 3 days, and then the day of. And that has clear, detailed information for our volunteers on what to wear, where to park, what to expect on their build day, anything that is necessary, whether it's construction or restore. Once that happens, then they're out on site. And then we have a whole process, especially for those corporate groups. When they provide a sponsorship to us for their build day, they get certain benefits. They get a t-shirt. We welcome them, kind of give them a brief like overview of Habitat, what we're doing, how we serve our clients. And then also our construction team takes over and does a whole safety talk. Those things are very important. I think that's part of that whole communication piece. And then they have their build day. Once their build day is over, or it could be a work day at Restore, they get those automatic emails the day after, one automatic email the day after, and it's a thank you basically for coming out, and then it asks them to complete a survey. That survey is also through Give Effect. It is a form that they complete, and that really allows us to see what their experience was like. One of the things that we make sure that we do is we follow up on surveys. We get a lot of surveys. It's very brief. It's 5 questions. They can rate us. They can tell us about their experience, tell us about the safety that they have about safe. They can rate their safety experience and also tell us if there was any issues. And then we can follow up with them. That is really key, and it helps with retention.
I was going to say, you're getting the feedback and then being able to take the changes that you're hearing and make the adjustments and grow and learn from it. So that's how you've kind of scaled up, right? You started small with your team and really thinking of the whole picture, right? And putting yourself in their shoes. Sorry, that's my dog barking. Put yourself put yourself in their shoes to understand all the questions as a volunteer. I go into a job, I'm going to ask all of X, Y, and Z questions, and you're already spoon feeding it, right? You're giving it
Absolutely.
in bite pieces.
Absolutely.
What would you say, I guess, for engaging? How did you guys,
Mhm.
now we've gone through the picture, right? Or
Mhm.
is there anything else
Yeah.
you wanted to share?
No. And yeah, and as far as engaging, I think one of the things that has been most important for us as far as building our corporate contacts, building our sponsorships, is really doing a lot of prospect research. When we have a corporate group come to us, then we have them in our system. They are a contact. They're receiving communication from us. They're invited to different events. We just continue to steward them. We kind of learn about them. We learn when they like to volunteer. We learn, really what their capacity is. Do they have VTO? Do they match gifts? Those type of things. We try to really do a lot of research about each of our corporate partners to kind of learn about them. Some of our corporate partners have specific ERGs or employee resource groups. So we really dive in and learn about that. So we know how to speak to them. We know what they're looking for and what is really going to engage their employees with us. So we continuously steward them in that way. But we're also always looking to grow. We're at that 120, sponsored build day for a year. But we want to grow. We want to bring new corporate partners in. We want to get more than 120 a year. So what our team is tasked with is constantly looking at other corporate small businesses, churches, whatever it might be, how we can relate to them, how we can bring them into our work. And we also really look at the neighborhoods that we serve. We serve 6 counties in Kansas City.
Okay.
So when we're working specifically in a new county or a neighborhood, we look at the corporate partners that are in that area. So because we know that they really are looking to what's happening in their community, what's happening with their
Invested,
neighbors, what's
right?
happening
Yeah.
for their employees.
Yeah, they're invested in the community, and what better way for them to get the connection by connecting with a habitat and your build or whatever it is, the restore in the community. So
Yeah.
that's smart. That's smart. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're able to kind of do a kind of a holistic approach. We really try to steward not only our corporate partners, but once they become a volunteer with us, we then have those individuals in our system. And so then they're getting our marketing team is targeting them for various things. So we're able to really look at them as an individual now. How can we convert them from a volunteer to a donor? Or how can we just get them to come out and volunteer with us as an individual? Or maybe they've been out with their corporate group, but maybe they now think, I really enjoyed that. I want to see if my church group wants to go out. So we kind of try to look at them as an individual after they've came to us through their corporate partner.
Oh, that's neat. I mean, that shows if you care, right? And then you're getting those personal touches. Now, how are you kind of gauging and finding out that information? Is it like while you're on the job site, you're like putting it in the back of your mind, or like how are you knowing that? Okay.
Yeah, so a couple different things. One is that we do everything, all of our marketing, all of our donor data, all of our volunteer data, it's through GiveEffect. And through that interaction piece in GiveEffect on an individual's profile, we can see emails that they've opened from us. So we kind of know a little bit about them through that way. We track our engagement or our interactions with them that way. We also surveyed our volunteers that were not donors about a year or two ago to really learn and understand how they wanted to hear from us, what was important to them, and what really encourage them to volunteer with us again. And by doing that, we know how to communicate with them. We know what our volunteers are looking for. And so we kind of tailored our marketing or tailored our stewardship around those pieces of information. And
Yeah.
that was with a goal that we were hoping to take some of those volunteers and convert them to donors. But
That
also, when their corporation decides they're going to do another team build with us, we want them to sign up to come out again. And we do have repeat volunteers that come out every year with their bank, with their employer for our women build or for our pride build or for our veterans build, they're return volunteers in that way. And so then we just continue to kind of steward them and communicate with them.
And would you say too, that has also helped you, like, I was talking about like changeover, right? Your point of contact changes because you've established that relationship with each individual, not just the team lead, right? Now you're
Yes.
able to just filter in and connect with other people in the organization because you've impacted not just one person.
Absolutely. A lot of times we will have an individual from a corporate partner reach out through our website with an inquiry of wanting to volunteer. And maybe they're not the person who holds the purse strings at their organization, but they just want to bring their team out to work with us. And we think that that is the perfect entry point for any corporate group, is just to get them out to volunteer, because we can learn from them. We can learn from them, and they can put us in touch with the person that may be able to make the decision as to whether or not they have sponsorship dollars for us. So we know that any person or any contact from any organization that reaches out to us, our very first task is not to talk to them about a sponsored build day, but is just to get them scheduled to come out and volunteer with us. So we have unsponsored build days all the time, but those
That's what I was
are always
wondering. Yeah.
the first entry point with a new corporate partner specifically. It's how we learn from them, and once you get that employee buy-in, that they really enjoyed it, then they're more likely to talk to the supervisor, talk to the person that's responsible for their community dollars, to say, hey, I'd really like us to look at sponsoring them or giving them some funds, supporting this build that they have.
Right. This would be a great team environment or team engagement, team development.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you say that this translates really well to even if you're a smaller affiliate? That was one of the questions, right? Like if you were just a smaller affiliate getting started with corporate volunteers, is having the unsponsored events and being able to get them in the door and understand and
Absolutely. I think I always say with our team, partly because I'm the one who's responsible for volunteer commitment or volunteer fulfillment. So our construction team's coming to me with an expectation of getting those volunteers out on site. And although we all like sponsorships, we also know that we have a need for volunteers in order to do our work. So I always say that any individual or corporate group or whatever it is that's reaching out, our very first duty with them is to just get them signed up to volunteer, because when we have really worked to revamp and to create this very positive volunteer experience, we have enough confidence that they're going to enjoy their experience, and that's only going to lead us to a bigger partnership with them. And the reality is not every corporate partner and not every small business or church has funding dollars,
right,
but
has the
they
capacity. Yeah.
oftentimes have the capacity for volunteer engagement. So I think it's just really getting to know them and understanding. And for those small affiliates that cannot have multiple groups out at one time to volunteer, I would just say it's just really important to continuously steward those individuals or those corporate partners that have came out, and also to think about, like, if you only have one build going on, you really don't have the capacity to have 3 or 4 groups out at one time, but to just be creative with your volunteer opportunities. We will sometimes take partners that come to us that have way too many volunteers for one build site, and we'll create like a community cleanup day where we're just going in and doing alleyways, cleaning up alleyways in the neighborhoods that we're working in. Or we had one of our foundations here locally that wanted to bring their entire organization out. It was about 90 people, and we cannot host that many people on our build sites.
No, there's
So
not
on
enough
that
room.
day, no, there's not enough room for safety reasons. That is not a good thing. So what we did is we focused on a specific neighborhood. We worked with their neighborhood association, and we were able to accommodate all 90 of those volunteers doing a community cleanup day. We had an empty lot where we just constructed walls for a house that we were building. Then we also had one build site where we had 8 volunteers on that. So we were able to kind of spread them out and do different things, but that really met the need for that organization, because they had a lot of individuals that did not want to be on a construction site, or maybe that didn't want to come out for the full day. So we were able to meet their needs by just being creative with the needs that our community needed or had.
That's great, because I think that was one of the comments people were making too, is like just being here to hear ideas, right? Something
Yeah.
outside of the box. It doesn't just have to be the builds and the restore, but thinking outside of the box. One question I had was managing 120 builds. Right now you've scaled up and you're at that size. How do you keep track of all the moving parts? Like,
That is a good question. Well, fortunately, over the last 4 years, we've grown our team a little bit. So we have very specific roles within our team of who's doing what and when, who's responsible for the sponsorship benefits and making sure that all of those things are met. But I do think that what has gotten us to this point is just having a very clear, organized process. Again, using our database, using GiveEffect to make sure that we can track our volunteers, track the volunteer hours. I think that's important too. When you have corporate groups that come out and volunteer with you, they really want a report after the fact or at the end of their fiscal year, especially if they're providing you dollars. They want to see the number of hours that they committed to you, that they worked for you. They want to see who those volunteers are. So we keep very clear data. We check our volunteers in and we check them out through GiveEffect. And that way we can run reports and we can say, here's your list of volunteers. Here's the date that they volunteered. Here's the location that they built on. And here's the number of hours. And so we can give them a total lump sum hours for the year of what they
oh, that's
committed to
amazing.
us. Yeah, and I think that that is so important, is being able to provide accurate reporting and accurate data. I'm sure all of us have engaged with various organizations where maybe you're not checked in, maybe you never had to even complete a waiver. Making sure all those pieces are in place and that you have a good tracking system, I think is extremely important when you're dealing with corporate partners, especially those that we work with a lot of banks that have CRA credits. They have to have that data and they will ask you for it, and it can really impact their desire to have it to continue for the next year for more funding, if you can provide them accurate data and accurate reporting.
I mean, that leads perfectly into the next question that I was thinking of. This is like, how do you track and manage group volunteer participation across different companies? And then what metrics matter most to you and your sponsors? So we kind of covered the front part of that
Yeah.
question, but the metrics that matter the most to your sponsors.
Yeah. So we have found in the last few years, we've done what we call impact reports. And so we can take that data that we have through GiveEffect, through our system of checking volunteers in, checking them out, how many volunteers we've had, and we can create accurate data to create an impact report for the year. So in our last fiscal year, we had almost 4,200 volunteers that came out to us over the course of the entire year for both restore and construction. And we know that because we can pull that data directly from GiveEffect because we've checked them all in, they've all registered, and all their information is there. We also know that we had almost 40,000 volunteer hours that were provided to us in the last fiscal year. And again, that's just because our construction team and our restore team and my team worked very hard at making sure that every volunteer is checked in and checked out and properly registered. So I think when we can share that impact report with our corporate partners and with our individual donors, it makes a real difference. Like, they like to see those numbers and they like to see the impact that volunteers and those sponsorship dollars have provided to our organization.
Wow, that's amazing though. I mean, that is a true testament. I mean, I know habitats do a lot of volunteering, but when you start hearing those impact numbers, right, that's so important to
Yeah,
have a report there. Yeah.
absolutely. And I think it probably could speak for every Habitat affiliate that's on this call or that you've worked with, is that volunteers are such an integral part to Habitat's work. We do not build houses without volunteers. Our restore operations are really dependent on volunteers. There are some organizations that the way that they serve their clients, they don't have as great of a need for volunteers, or they don't have as clear or defined volunteer opportunity. But Habitat affiliates, that is not the case. We really are an organization that depends on and relies heavily on volunteers. So I think anytime you can improve and create a very positive volunteer experience, you'll see your numbers for volunteer engagement increase, you'll see your capacity increase, and you'll see the work that you do to serve your clients increase.
I mean, that is true, right? It's making sure that everyone feels and you are actually engaged and they're important because that's the heartbeat of your organization.
Absolutely.
So if you were looking right to the next step of a volunteer, that volunteer to donor conversion you touched on a little bit,
Mhm.
what's one specific tactic that you think helps you be successful? I know we've talked about a lot, but
And like I had said, we used an outside consultant to do some surveying of our contacts or our individuals that had volunteered with us over the last several years, and asking them what they wanted to know, what they wanted to hear about, how they wanted to be communicated with. And then we took that information, and that is really what we use from a marketing perspective and how we communicate with individuals. And those individuals can come to us through their corporate partners, their employees through a corporate bill day, but they also can come to us individually. And so we make sure that we are using that information to really communicate out. And I think that when a volunteer comes out and builds with us, and then they are provided information that they want to know, what is the impact that we're making in the community, they're more likely to not only volunteer with us again, but donate some of their personal dollars to us. And so we have seen a lot of success in that volunteer to donor conversion simply by making sure that we're communicating in a clear way with our volunteers, whether it's direct mail, which we don't do very much of, email marketing. And our email marketing we're very strict on how we do email marketing. We don't want emails landing in people's inbox every day because we know that those are often going to go to spam or we're going to be unsubscribed.
Right.
So we are very specific on how we market to those individuals.
I appreciate like your candid conversation with me too. I know that we have some 10 minutes or so for Q&A for people to post some questions.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to open that up to everyone. While maybe we talk through this last piece of Give Effect is the workflow management. I know your team's not using workflows, so everyone, please feel free to put in some questions on Q&A for Stacy, and we'll kind of run through those as we go. But Stacy, talk to me a little bit. You talk about the communication piece, right? And you're not using workflows yet. So tell
Yeah.
me what's your plans, or are you guys thinking of kind of
Yeah.
developing workflows?
Yeah. So we have over the last year, and we have two new marketing team members that joined us in the last 6 months. So that is one of their goals, is to really start using that workflow automation piece and Give Effect. Right now, currently, what we do is we are very specific on how we communicate with our contacts, all contacts, individuals. And part of that is just designing clear outreach we have 2 appeals a year. So we make sure that those emails are spring appeal and end of the year appeal, and how we market to them. We're able to use the information in Give Effect. Are they a current donor, or are they a lapsed donor? Are they a current volunteer or a lapsed volunteer? And we create audiences based on that information. And then that is the people that we target for specific emails. We do have all audience emails occasionally, but most of our emails are a targeted audience. And it's
Oh,
that information to Give Effect that we're able to target specific audiences.
that's neat, because I think too that sometimes it's just easier to choose everybody versus a group.
Yeah,
Okay, so one
absolutely.
question I've got coming in, we've actually had uh, a few people ask somewhat similar questions. So
Mhm.
we have a mediocre success rate at having people actually fill out the waiver before they
Mhm.
show up. How do you ensure they do it before showing up? And then, because we do send these emails as well and have links for pre-event day waivers, but it's like pulling teeth to have them do it beforehand. So how do
Yeah.
you guys
So
manage?
how we do it is we utilize the reservation system in Give Effect. So whatever the volunteer management tool that you're using, like I was saying before, it's all digital, and we send that link to the main person, the main point of contact with that corporate partner or church group or whatever it may be. They are responsible for getting their volunteers. We have a set number of volunteers for our construction sites and a set number for Restore. And we have a relationship manager here at Habitat that is assigned to each of those partners, whatever they may be. That person is responsible for following up with that point of contact and making sure that those waivers are filled out. we know the waivers are filled out because we get the reservation kind of turns green and give effect, if you will, of when they're filled out, when they're ready to go. If they're not, we will continue to follow up with them when their main point of contact. We make it very clear in our template email that we send our points of contact for each organization that they have a 2-week deadline that they have to be registered by. So that's kind of, it's a lot of managing. It's a, you know, for that relationship manager. But one of the things that we promise our restore managers and our construction team is that they're not responsible for getting waivers. So really, we don't like people to show up without a waiver. And we know ahead of time if there is going to be someone that's going to show up without a waiver. And so we will go out and take care of that. But I would say we rarely have paper waivers. Everything that we do is digital.
Well, that's the other thing I was thinking of too, is with Give Effect, there is so many ways of doing it. So William commented, you know, the system he uses, they require waivers before. You can do that with Give Effect too. So they have to complete the application and waiver before they even move forward. So that's something to,
yeah. And the nice thing about it, like the automated emails that we have set up, is you don't even get those automated emails in Give Effect if you haven't registered, if you haven't completed the waiver and you haven't turned green, if you will, in the reservation, which is really nice because they don't even get the address to the build site until they've completed the waiver.
That's right. Yep. And that clear communication again, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Can you share your template email that you send out to corporate volunteer groups? I've seen a couple questions of you sharing maybe your templates or your surveys. That's something we can talk about and talk offline, and I'll have Tara in marketing kind of. I just wanted to highlight that I see the questions coming through.
Yeah, and the form, the template form in Give Effect is what we use for our surveys, and we keep our surveys very short and sweet because we know that anything outside of maybe 5 questions is not going to get filled out. We make it very easy, and it's a link that it's embedded in an automatic email that goes out that says, you know, please complete this. And I think those surveys are very, very important.
That's the other thing too, is the design of the survey, right? Short, sweet. You don't want them to spend 10 minutes, right? Because they're going to they're going to lose interest and be gone.
We've decided that the most important thing to us is their overall volunteer experience and their safety satisfaction. Those 2 things are basically what our questions are. And then it's an optional question of, do you want to make a testimonial, that then our marketing team can use that quote in some of their marketing. But those are our questions. We don't go sway outside of that. And that's for both restore and construction, because safety is just as important in the restores as it is on the construction sites.
I love it. I mean, I think it's important. Okay, I've got another question from Anne. Let's see. Can you share a little bit more about the way you prospect for corporate groups? Like, do you work with local chamber of commerces? Do you utilize other processes to find new corporations? What's your...
Absolutely. We do. We work with all of our local chamber of commerce. We have a team member that goes to a lot of their networking events to really try to engage with new corporate partners, meet new people. We also have 2 team members that are specifically working on individual and corporate prospect research. And with that corporate prospect research, it's really just like getting on their website, kind of learning about... LinkedIn is a great tool for that, learning about other organizations that they've volunteered with. Like if we see another local nonprofit talking about a corporate partner that volunteered with them, we're probably going to reach out to that corporate partner and say, hey, come volunteer with us. So we just do a lot of kind of digging for data, if you will. Yeah, a lot of research. And also those employee resource groups within those corporate groups, those larger corporate groups, are so important. So if you see that they have a women's networking group, they might be a great one to reach out to come join you for Women Build. Or if they have a Pride group, they might be a great one for you to reach out to about coming to do a Pride Build. If they have a veterans resource group, we often are constantly reaching out to them because there's usually some dollars that are tied to those resource groups too.
I mean, for my nonprofit, I know it's not a habitat, but garden clubs, right? So I've got garden clubs in my area. You also have high schools that have maintenance or engineering
absolutely
groups, STEM classes, right? You've got, I mean, there's a lot of areas to tap into different groups.
Most of our public high schools, that's a great comment. Most of our public high schools have kind of a engineering or a future construction industry type group. And those are the first ones that I go to volunteer on our construction sites. We don't have a lot of high school groups that volunteer on our construction sites, but those groups we always do. And they are the best volunteers, but they also are going to be future professionals. So they're going to remember their experience at Habitat. And when they get into the professional world, then they're going to want to be bringing their organization to you to volunteer.
Right. Like, you get a senior in high school and now they're 3 years into college. They're in a club, or they're in engineering, or maybe they're welders. I mean, you've got
Exactly.
all the industries to kind of tap into.
Same thing with local universities too. Those are great places to reach out to. We work with about 3 universities that have Engineering Without Borders organizations in it, and they come out frequently to volunteer with us. And the nice thing about those groups is they're willing to volunteer in the cold winter months. I'm sure we all experience, those of us that are living in areas that have brutal winters, it's really hard to get volunteers to work on a construction site in the winter. So you have to find those industries that have workers that are already used to working outside. Maybe your power company, all of those types of industries that are not afraid to be outside, because that's a struggle for us, is really filling those group spots in the winter.
Yeah, no, that is true. Okay, so we've got time for one more question. And then I've also kind of just want to recap the other speed learning session that we're having and the conferences we're going to be at. But let's see. The question here. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but how do you maintain partnerships when key corporate contacts or decision makers change roles or leave the company? So this kind of recaps back to the retention and recruitment part.
Yeah. So again, we really rely heavily on GiveEffect for keeping our information for each of our corporate partners up to date. So we might have a corporate partner that has 4 or 5 different points of contact on their profile. We kind of know that some of them are the ones that we reach out to for scheduling volunteers. Some of them are the ones that we reach out to for funding or for sponsored build days or whatever. Whoever that relationship manager is here internally is responsible for keeping that up to date at all times. So we make sure that our data is in our databases is always up to date and current. And usually with those corporate partners, if you send an email to your main contact and you find out they're no longer working for that, usually it's going to bounce to someone else who's going to get back with you. But if not, go to one of their volunteers that came out with that corporate partner the year before and say, hey, I noticed so-and-so is no longer there. Do you know who the contact would be for that type of, community engagement within the organization? So I think it's just keeping good data, number one, and then just utilizing those volunteers who have already been out to work with you through that corporate partner.
And it brings it back to that servant leadership style, right? Putting yourself in someone else's shoes and really being, how would you want to be, the golden rule, do unto others as you have do unto them, right? So how do you want to be treated is how you're going to portray and help other people who become a part of your habitat. So I think that's great. And you guys are exemplifying that in your actions, right? To get everybody. Well, I appreciate your time here. And thank you so much we apologize for you. I know how stressful that was trying to get.
Well, I'm so sorry. I usually am much more tech savvy than that. So Zoom really had me stumped this time. This was a first for me. So I apologize, especially for those of you who hopped on during your lunch hour. I'm sorry that we kept you waiting. I'm always open for any questions. You can find me on LinkedIn. GiveEffect has my contact. If anyone wants to meet and talk, I'd always be willing to meet with you. So thank you for having us. I will give a shout out to GiveEffect because we love this database. It has really changed our lives here at Habitat. It has made our relationships easier to manage, easier to maintain. So thank you, GiveEffect, for creating such a great database for us.
Oh, thank you, Stacy. And Stacy was not paid for that subscription or whatever that commercial is when they mentioned that. I appreciate your time too. We know you're busy and we know every Habitat person is busy in your roles. Thank you for taking that time. And I did see that we've had so much interest too. We'll look at trying to do maybe additional details or a recap of questions and Q&A with Stacy as well too. So Stacy, you can stay if you want while I'm wrapping up, or if you need to hop off, feel free to as well. Tara is posting a comment about the tools that Habitat Kansas City uses, and there's a link to book a demo with me if you did want to continue the conversation. I always try to tailor in specific all Habitat examples when I'm talking to Habitat. So I'll pull Kansas City examples up and we'll talk through it and you can see it. And join us next week for on the 27th at noon Eastern for part 2 of the series, where we're doing fundraising events that work in maximizing your impact and ROI for your Habitat affiliates. We have Laura, who is the philanthropic director of Greater Green Bay Habitat for Humanity, joining us. So similar setup as Stacy. So that will be next week, where we're just having that conversation with her. And then I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here for the Habitat, what are those? Habitat conferences, regional conferences that we're attending. So join us pre-conference. We're doing a virtual coffee break and some gamification for pre-conference of your meetings. So be on the lookout for those invites if you are Habitat in the cities that we're going to be attending. So we've got the Midwest Regional Conference in April 1st. And then we move to the Western region, April 15th. And then April 28th, we're going to be in Florida and at the Florida State Conference. And then May 20th, we'll be at Vail. And I'm going to 3 of the 4. So if I haven't met you yet, please stop by, say hi. We also have fun stuff going on at our booth. So I appreciate everyone. And Amy, thank you so much for joining too and providing your comments as well. So appreciate everyone joining today. And if we didn't get to your questions, we'll review those as well. Thank you so much for joining the speed learning session.